Hello all, welcome to this new workbench video following the construction and build of the Captain Baxter kit, which I produce for my own small shop, Vectis 3D Models. This kit of course is a Captain Baxter kit in 00 4mm and is designed to be fitted onto a L&Y Pug produced by Hornby or Dapol. Which can be picked up relatively cheaply these days. This kit has been on sale on Shapeways for a good many years, sold about 10-15, but has always been lacking extra bits and pieces and detail. Now I've figured out the CAD systems and all that kind of thing, it's been rebuilt from the ground up with brand new bits, buffers, steps, springs and also cylinders. I'll talk you through the parts that you have in the kit, but also you'll need a great deal of other small bits and pieces, wire, copper and various detailing items as well. In this kit you will get one body shell, a pair of cylinders with rear covers depending which slide bars and cylinder rods you go for, one smoke box door, a set of steps, 2 front and 2 rear, 4 buffers, 2 front and 2 rear, 2 springs, 2 tank filler caps, 1 cab back plate, and lastly 2 NEM pockets for the L&Y Pug chassis. These may change slightly when released. So welcome to the workbench. Before we start on the build of Baxter, obviously you will need a base to work from. So what I've used is the L&Y Pug from either Hornby or Dapol. It's about 30-40 years old now, and I picked one up from eBay. Here we are, LMS Pug, L&Y Pug. This is the Dapol one, exactly the same, no difference. The motors are the same and everything else is the same. So you can pick these up between 15 and 25 pounds if you're lucky. I bought this one for about 18, so quite cheap. So you can buy one of these, and this is what you need for the base of the actual kit itself. Then you can sell off the bits and make a little bit of money on the side. So here we have the L&Y Pug out of the box. This will be used as a donor as well as for bits and pieces we'll require to build the Baxter kit. As I said, it's about 30-40 years old, so it's not exactly groundbreaking, but it's a good donor for certain things. So we'll need bits and pieces off of this, like the slide bars, the wheels, the chassis, the motor if you wish to use it, and the rest of it will pretty much be sold on. So all you'll need is a Phillips screwdriver, and then it's off we go to start pulling it to bits. So about halfway through, we've got the cab off. This just clips on. There's 3 clips, 2 on the sides, which you can see there, and there's another one underneath the actual chassis itself. So we've taken the retaining plates, the bottom of the chassis off, taken most of the screws we can see off, and we'll just need to undo 1 screw underneath to hopefully release the chassis from the body shell, and also one on the top which I've forgotten about, just the one in the cab of course. So this one goes through from the motor to the chassis. So there goes the wheels. We'll need those, so keep them. I need that screw as well, I think, so we'll put that to one side, and I'll release the motor, but you need to unsolder the wires on there, of course. And there's another screw there which I've missed. I knew there was another one somewhere. There we go. So that's 2 screws, one just in front of the rear axle and one just ahead of the front axle. So that's now released like that, and then we'll have to unsolder the motor so we can take it thoroughly apart. Okay, so I have removed the motor, leaving 2 wires from the chassis. Now what I might do is replace these wires, as they're quite thick, with some smaller wire. Depending what motor option you're going for, as I say, there are multiple options on this kit which one you want to use. We don't need the actual cylinders, but you may need the bits off of them, like the slide bars which you can see behind. So we do need those. We need the wheels, we need some screws, we need the plate underneath, and we need the old motor, which is quite readily available. Again, we'll need the worm underneath, depending what option you're going for in terms of motor. As I say, this one's the older one, but it still does the job. It might be a bit noisy, but it does the job. So with that done, this needs a bit of a clean. So you can see there's a bit of fluff and hair on it, but it's good to go basically. So that's what we need, and that's all we need from that, and then the rest can be sold, including the old couplings, or maybe you want to keep them as spares. So with that done, we'll go on to what modifications you need to make. So we have the chassis all stripped down, ready to go on to the next stage. Now this chassis as it is will not fit the body shell. It needs a little bit of filing, only in one area, which is at the back here. So you can see on the rear here it sort of slopes downwards. So what you just need to do is with a needle file, I have one here, is just cut a little groove out, so it's pretty much flat but goes backwards by about 0.5 of a mil, maybe a millimeter. So if you do that, I'll just start on it so you can see. So line it up with the bottom or the top, depending which way you're looking at it. You just want to square that off on both sides, not just the one. Okay, that's coming up alright. So just taking it back by about a mil. Okay, that's one side. Okay, I've done it at the same time as the other side, but it's just easier to show you like this. So you got that side which is not done, on the side in the background which is filed back. So we'll just do the other side, come back to you. So the back has been filed, you can see there, cut out. So that now leaves us to check with the body shell. Now the body shell already comes with some threaded ferrules or nuts that you can put in, or are already put in, my apologies. So they're already pre-fitted when you get your body shell, and they should be glued in place and nice and flush with the bottom, and you should have filed off the edges to clean up where the supports were. So chassis and the body shell, just put the wires through the holes just to double check. Now you will need some new screws, because obviously these are threaded. There we go. That fits in there very nicely. There we go. It's all in place, and you can just about see or check in the light to see if the holes all line up, which they do. Took an old screw from the previous one, so there we go. Lines up with the front, the one here, and the one just there as well. Now screws you'll need some M2 brass screws. You can pick these up from Eileen's Emporium, pack of 12 for only a couple of quid. Flat bladed, just tighten it up, make sure it all sort of lines up, which hopefully it will. And one in the back there. So you'll need three screws on this. So one at the front where the cylinder block does go, and the other two are holding the chassis to the body shell. I don't need to tighten all the way up, but I'll show you. So that is basically on there now, without its cylinder block of course. So that all fits together, which is nice, and it all goes together perfectly. So that's good. That's what you need to check for. Wires are out the top without a problem, and also we can check that the motor still fits, which will be this way round. Thread them through the holes in the bottom of the motor mount. There we go, one there. Can't see that one. Okay, just about get that through. Have to get caught up in the motor as well. There we go. Still won't go through. Okay. So there we go. That all fits together. Like so. So depending if you're going for that motor option, that one fits in like so, and that's all perfectly good. Yep, looks good to me. Good stuff. So that all fits, it's all good to go, and if you're picking this option, that should work as well. So next we'll go on to the slide bars and cylinders, depending which option you go for. And there's two options, and we'll get into that in a second. Okay, before we move on to cylinders, I'll just bring up to date with the chassis here, which is lightly screwed together. Now I mentioned you won't have to cut all the way through the back. Unfortunately you do have to cut quite a bit off, maybe another mil or two. And you can see the screw that holds the coupling now. I've pretty much cut it back to the same, straight down from where I've filed it back on the first clip I've done. So a little error from me, you do have to cut all the way down and through a coupling pad, as it were. But don't worry, we've got a solution to that as well, which will feature later on. So moving on to cylinders, this bit gets a little bit complicated, so I'm going to try and mention it all. Now the simplest solution and the easiest solution to put the slide bars on this model are basically reusing what you have already. So if I grab the Pug, or what's left of it, now these have slide bars behind these covers which just unclip, and that is in one piece of plastic which goes up and around and down. You can just about see the join there and there. You can remove that by putting a sharp knife behind it and pulling it away. You can use some acetone to soften the glue, which is just normal super glue usually, and you can just pull that off in one go. Once you've got that off, they will also fit into the 3D printed cylinders. So here's some I've made earlier. So I've cut the pad or the plastic off the back of the cylinders from the Pug. I've made one circular, so you can see one circular and one's just been cut straight off. These are then glued in, and I've glued the rods as well instead of getting them a bit floppy and flopping around all over the place. But they're glued in nicely, so you can see the black plastic around the ends. They just fit into the holes. And then of course you'll just be able to use the old wheels and slider, and they work just fine. That's the simple solution. It won't cost you any more money. So at the end of the day it's the easiest solution. But you can file off the top and the bottom clips, just make that a bit tidier. So that's option 1. The cylinder block will also need some sanding, filling, etc. ready for paint. So moving that to one side, this is the more complicated option. So this is option 2 if you dare to do it, or you don't have to, but if you are a little bit more wanting to improve that area, because it's not very pretty and not very nice to look at, and I do not recommend going down and buying up Hornby spares. I haven't done it, but I've reused the bits of Peckett to put on my version. I don't recommend buying up spares because it just drives the price up for spares for the people that actually need them, so I do not recommend doing it. But this version is a little bit more economical, easier to do, but will need a fair bit of skill to get right. So to start off with, I've gone to RT Models and I bought this etch, which is a double slide bar, which has the 2 slide bars, slide bars and the piston rod, as well as the bits on the back. It got holes in already, but it still needs a bit more work to allow it to actually work on the slide bars. As 009 locos have something at the back which keeps it in place, this isn't going to hold itself very well. So you can use this etch and cut it off and trim it, solder this and this together and drill a hole through the middle, then solder it all together onto this part, and hopefully it should come out quite well. Now I've used some nuts and bolts, or nuts and screws, or whatever you want to call them. I bought these from Eileen's Emporium. These are 16BA cheese head bolts and also nuts as well. Very fiddly, but you can use these to attach the bits and pieces together and solder them up. Now the slide bars are attached to obviously the actual connecting rods. Here you can see them all in place. I haven't glued these sliders in, so they keep moving, so be aware of that. So these will also need a little bit of work. You need to find a washer which you can solder to the back of it, which then you can solder onto that, and then also put the screw and the washer through, because the hole on the back of the connecting rod's quite large and will just fall out anyway, so you need some extra support there. So a small 16BA or a 1mm washer in brass would be great. Now you can solder that all together and you will have a slightly more better looking sort of slide bar arrangement, which works quite well. Now obviously I've got bits in the end. Now these will come with the kit, you can use them if you want or not. So these are the end caps, and you can see it's got holes in the end, 3 holes, 1 for the slider and 2 for the slide bars. So they will come with the kit, or the cylinders, whatever you want to use. They will be glued in to here. Make sure they're looking upwards and straight. You can attach the slide bars at this end, and also I imagine you can probably slide them through the original plastic bracket that comes with the Pug, so you can glue that onto the back of the bracket as well. So that's one other solution, a little bit more technical, a little bit more difficult, but I prefer to go with this option because it just gives you a little bit more detail and it looks a lot better. So I hope that helps on that section, and we'll move back to the chassis. So the last part of the Baxter chassis build, as you can see we're getting on with the body build now, is pretty straightforward, but it will depend on which chassis you have, whether it's a Dapol one or a Hornby one. The Dapol one, the keeper plate is held in by an additional clip at the back of the chassis, so nearest the motor. whereas the Hornby one has an additional screw which replaces the clip. Now there's no trouble in either or. The keeper plate itself is thick enough so it won't bow and bend, and it generally will clip into place anyway, so it should be alright. I've had one running for years and years without a clip on the back, so, and it hasn't fallen apart. So just give you a quick look in here. So this is one I've already done, and this is a Hornby chassis. You can see there is a post there, and also on the Dapol one there is a post, but it's lower, and that just keeps the motor secured. So the screw goes in from the top for the motor, and then the screw comes in from the bottom to keep the keeper plate on, and this is the keeper plate. You can see the additional screw hole there where my thumb is. On the Dapol one there isn't one, and there is a clip on the underside which isn't there on the Hornby one. Now the small difference is you will have to cut the clip off, which dangles down a bit like the front one, down from the keeper plate. You just need to trim that off, and the screw will hold it in just there, so it shouldn't be a problem. And as I say, I've had it before. With the Hornby one, again, there shouldn't be a problem. There is enough room to fit a pocket in here, just about. You can see there's not much room between the back of there and the post, but it's pretty straightforward. I have my KD here, and I'll just slip this in. You had a nice positive click. That's not going anywhere, and that is nice and easy, and plenty of room behind. So that's alright, and that will be fine. So I'll just take you through what to do. Tools wise, you need your fiberglass pencil, file, sharp knife, and some blue cutters. Of course, 2 NEM pockets for the front and the rear. The front one may be slightly different, not quite sure yet. They're still sort of in working or progress, but they're the right length, the right place, and I think KD 18s or 19s will be okay depending on your radius of bends. So let's get into it and have a look. So on the upturned Baxter prototype, this is my prototype, so it's the one I'm making for myself. So it's slightly different, but the chassis is the same. So we'll start at the front. You can see we've got plenty of room at the front for mounting anything on. So this one's pretty straightforward. We don't really need to do much work. So fiberglass pen or abrasive pen. Just take the shine off the plastic. So we've got something to glue onto, and of course the glue you need is araldite, not super glue. So super glue will break on the sharp impact, so if you shunt it quite hard and hit it, it will break on impact, which isn't much good. So araldite is the glue of choice. So do that there. That's nice and less shiny, as you can see, taking the shine off. Got your pocket here. As you can see, that's quite shiny as well. So on the underside, on the wings as I call it, just take the shine off with the fiberglass pen if you can, and not get yourself on the fingers. There you go, so that's fine. So when gluing, you need to try and keep it to the outside edge on these parts here, and just along the edge here possibly. You don't want too much glue, because you don't want it to ooze into the channel when you fit it. So when you've glued it, it goes straight on the front without too much problem. You'll latch over the front like so. There you go, so you can see there. Get it in the centre, glue it in place, wait for the glue to go off, and you should be good to go. So that's the front done without too much trouble. So now we'll head on to the back, which is a little bit more interesting and a bit more involved, shall we say. So moving on to the back of the model, as mentioned before, this is a Hornby chassis on this particular prototype. The Dapol one is slightly different, and I will mention it as we go along. So screws undone, pull that up if you can. I can't typically. There we go. So pull that up, clip it, unclip it at the front. So on this one we don't have a clip at the back, and you can see the mounting is higher than the Dapol one. If you want to see the Dapol one, you can go and see the L&Y Pug NEM pocket conversion, which is also on my YouTube channel. But this is basically lower, a lot lower down. So on here we just need to cut a slot on this plane here, on this piece of plastic here I should say, and we just need to cut that. And you can cut that down with some cutters. For measurements, if you want, just use your pocket, make sure it's in the center and cut it. Try doing this with one hand, it gets quite interesting. So there you go, it's in the center. So what I will do is just score a line there. So that's one mark. You can just about see. It's on the other side of there. If you cut it small enough, a bit more maybe. If you cut it small enough, you can always make it slightly bigger. Not a problem. So I've marked that, and then what I'll do is I'll cut down to this level here, file it to make it nice and clean. So I'll just do that now, and I'll come back to you. So you can see on the rear here, I've actually cut the hole just there and there. I've also just taken the shine off the edge here with the fiberglass brush or abrasive brush, and now we're just going to check the fit of the pocket, make sure it's nice and level. There we go, so that fits in there quite nicely, just there. There we go. So that can be glued into place using some araldite, which is always on hand, as you can see. So there's one there, and if I put the other one at the front, it's not quite in place, but there you go. So that one can be glued in place as well, and there's plenty of room, front and rear, for your couplings to clip into place. So once that's done, that's the chassis pretty much complete. We can then go on to the body shell and start from there, and find part 2 on the YouTube list or in the instructions.